This is one of the most powerful Ranger lightning builds in Path of Exile 2. If you want to destroy bosses within seconds, clear mobs instantly, and feel extremely overpowered while leveling, you need to try this build right now. Welcome back everyone, thank you so much for clicking on the video. Today I'm going to show you how to make the best Lightning Ranger leveling build. With this build, I was able to complete Acts 1 to 3 fast and easy, and now I'm just deleting all of the bosses in Cruel difficulty. This build will come together piece by piece as you progress through the game and is meant to carry you all the way to endgame. When I started playing Path of Exile 2, my first class was the Monk, and if you've been a part of the channel, you'll know that I have a Monk build series where I showed you how to make the best Lightning Monk build from Act 1 all the way to endgame mapping. For those of you who are interested in the Monk and want to use the best build in the game, I'll have a link to my Monk build series in the description below. Now, the Ranger was always going to be the second character I level up, and I'm actually surprised I didn't start with this class because I use the bow in every RPG I play. It is no surprise that the Ranger is one of the strongest classes in the rankings right now. The key to making this build so strong is having the right skill synergy. This build only needs 5 skills to succeed, and with the right support gems, you are going to destroy everything. The strategy requires you to chain lightning bolts and spam lightning arrows as quick as possible, which is made simple thanks to some of the best in slot passive skills, spirit gems, and the Deadeye ascendancy. This build has very fast attack speed, which grows quicker the more aggressive you play, and it isn't just a damage dealing glass cannon either. This build has incredible defense thanks to its high evasion, allowing you to avoid up to 75% of enemy attacks, and more when your Wind Dancer buff is active. If you want a head start to making the best Deadeye Ranger build in Path of Exile 2, this is the perfect build for you. In this video, we'll go over the best skill gems, support gems, passive skill choices, and gear. Let's get started. The skill gems on this build are Lightning Arrow, Lightning Rod, Orb of Storms, Herald of Thunder, and Wind Dancer. Lightning Arrow is your main damage dealing skill. This skill fires a lightning charged arrow at your target and will also chain to nearby enemies, which means you can deal damage to multiple enemies at once while you're activating this skill. The closer enemies are to each other, the more targets you can hit at once. Lightning Bolt is the skill you will use the most though. This skill fires an arrow that drops from above, creating a lightning burst. The arrow remains in the ground and any chaining lightning beams can chain to it, creating even more lightning bursts. This means you can activate Lightning Bolt to spread AoE, and then attack affected enemies with your lightning arrow to amplify its damage and create lightning bursts. Both skills synergize well with each other and will become a staple of your damage dealing combo. You'll drop as many lightning rods as you can to shock enemies and deal damage to them, and then target them with your lightning arrow for even more burst damage. Before you do any of this though, you need to use Orb of Storms first. Orb of Storms is a spell skill gem that can be used by any class, meaning it isn't exclusive to the Ranger and it won't be found in the Ranger skill gem list, so it can be easily missed. This spell creates an orb of electricity that fires, chaining lightning bolts at nearby enemies. This is the most important skill on the build, and it's the main contributor to the fast time to kill and nearly instant shock on enemies. This is because every time you cast a lightning skill like Lightning Bolt or Lightning Arrow within the orb's radius, the orb's attack frequency increases over time. The more lightning skills you spam, the stronger Orb of Storms will be. This is why I'm constantly dropping orbs on the ground in the gameplay and then following it up with Lightning Bolt. It's constantly amplifying my damage. I'll drop the orb, nuke bosses with Lightning Bolt 5 or 6 times, and then target them with Lightning Arrow to speed up the killing process. It is incredibly satisfying to see on screen, and it will turn you into a killing machine. Herald of Thunder is a spirit skill gem that requires 30 spirit to activate and will increase the effectiveness of your lightning skills drastically. While Herald of Thunder is active, killing shocked enemies will release lightning bolts that deal attack damage to all surrounding enemies. This means after you kill enemies with Orb of Storms, Lightning Bolt, and Lightning Arrow, lightning bolts will shoot from the sky and deal even more lightning damage to other enemies within radius. It's an effortless way to add more AoE damage to the build. You'll constantly shock enemies, which means Herald of Thunder will always be active. And lastly, we have Wind Dancer, which requires 60 spirit to activate and is a very powerful defensive buff for your Ranger. This skill grants you a buff that gives you 15% more evasion per stage with a max of 3 stages. It takes 1.5 seconds to build each stage, which means after 4.5 seconds, you will maintain 45% extra evasion on your build until you are hit by a melee attack. Once hit, the buff will consume all stages to damage and knock back enemies around you and then reset immediately. This buff is very easy to maintain with this class because you'll always be attacking enemies from range, and with a high enough evasion rating, you can even maintain it in close quarter situations as well if you play carefully. The playstyle for this build is very simple. You'll try your best to maintain distance between you and your targets to avoid as much damage as possible, which is incredibly easy to do thanks to the build's quick movement speed and high evasion. You can kill enemies from range with lightning arrow, or you can group mobs together, drop an orb of storms, and then spam as many lightning bolts as you need to clear enemies quickly. Mana regen is very important though if you want to be as efficient as possible, but if you have the right support gems and mana regen rate modifiers in your gear, you shouldn't have any problems. Next, let's break down the support gems, which are very important for making this build deal enough damage and so you can maximize the potential of each skill in the build. Now, before I start, I need to mention that this is my second character, which means I had access to level 2 and level 3 support gems right from the start. Players who are starting the game with this class are not going to benefit from this, and you will need to wait until Act 2 and Act 3 Cruel difficulty to obtain some of these support gems. So, if the Ranger is your first character, I would use as many of these support gems as you can until you are able to unlock the higher end ones later. If this is your second character, you'll be able to unlock all of these support gems, assuming you saved enough uncut support gems during your first playthrough. Starting with Lightning Arrow, I'm using 4 support gems. Martial Tempo increases attack speed by 25%. Innervate adds 35% extra lightning damage to your arrows for 3 seconds whenever you kill shocked enemies, amplifying the damage of the skill. Primal Armament adds 25% more elemental damage to your attacks, and Heft adds 30% more physical damage to your attacks. Even though Dexterity is your main attribute on the build, you'll need a bit of strength and a good amount of intelligence to activate some of these support gems, so just keep that in mind. For Lightning Rod, I'm using 3 support gems. Scattershot gives you the ability to shoot 2 projectiles with this skill, but lowers your damage by 20%, which isn't a big deal since you'll be stacking more lightning rods over time, allowing you to shock and deal damage to enemies quicker. Conduction adds a 100% chance for you to shock enemies with your lightning rods, which is important if you want to activate Herald of Thunder and debuff enemies in the process. For those of you that don't know, shocked enemies will always take 20% extra damage. And lastly, Overcharge increases the magnitude of your shocks by 75%, making them more powerful. Like I mentioned earlier, Herald of Thunder shoots lightning bolts from the sky whenever you kill shocked enemies, and this buff can be even stronger with the right support gems. Concentrated Effect increases the damage of the lightning bolts by 40%, but lowers AoE radius by 50%. To eliminate the reduction to your AoE spread, you can use the Magnified Effect support gem, which gives you 40% more AoE radius back, meaning you'll only lose 10% AoE, but still gain that 40% area damage, which is nice. And for the last gem, I'm using Elemental Focus, which increases the damage of the lightning bolts by an additional 25%. The first support gem I'm using for Orb of Storms is Chain. Chain allows your lightning attacks to chain more often, but lowers the damage of your hits by 50%. Overabundance allows you to drop 2 orbs instead of 1, which will increase the radius of your AoE with your amplified lightning skills, but will lower the duration of each orb by 50%. Unleash is also a very important support gem because it allows the effects of each Orb of Storm's cast to reoccur when you cast the skill again. In simple terms, Overabundance raises the limit of the skill to 2 from 1, so you can have 2 orbs up at the same time. Unleash makes it so you can cast both orbs at the same time rather than casting one then the other. For Wind Dancer, I'm using the Clarity support gem, which gives you 30% mana regen rate whenever the skill is active, Vitality, which gives you 1% life per second whenever the skill is active, and Blind, which gives you a 100% chance to blind enemies on hit. This means as long as you play from range, keep your distance, and evade attacks, you'll maintain 30% mana regen, 1% life per second, and if an enemy does manage to hit you, you'll blind them immediately, lowering their hit chance and evasion rating in the process. My Ranger passive tree is currently a work in progress, which means you should expect a more complete version in the near future as I get closer to level 100. This build is using the Deadeye Ascendancy and currently has 4 Ascendancy points. One of the best Deadeye skills to help you increase your attack speed, DPS, and movement speed is Tailwind, which can be unlocked through the nodes here at the bottom. You'll increase your skill speed by 4% and then reach Gathering Winds. With this skill, whenever you use skills, you'll stack the Tailwind buff all the way up to 10 stacks. When Tailwind is active, you gain 1% movement speed, 3% skill speed, and 15% evasion per stack, which means at max stacks, you'll maintain 10% extra movement speed, 30% skill speed, and 150% extra evasion. You can also increase your skill speed by an additional 4% and then unlock Windward, which gives you 3% physical damage negation per stack of Tailwind, giving you up to 30% defense on top of your Tailwind stacks, which is really nice. At the beginning, you'll increase your projectile damage by grabbing the first couple of nodes until you reach Honed Instincts, which gives you 8% projectile speed, 8% attack speed, and plus 10 dexterity on the build. Then you'll want to grab Vile Wounds, which gives you a nice boost in DPS whenever you inflict shock on enemies. This skill increases your damage by 35% when you hit enemies affected by status effects. From here, you'll continue downward until you reach this set of nodes here, which will increase the bonuses from your quiver all the way up to 80% if you unlock every single node. After that, you'll continue downward and grab the nodes here so you can boost your crit chance and crit damage on your build, which will increase your DPS over time. You'll gain 30% crit damage, 10% crit chance, and then an additional 50% crit hit damage whenever you drink a flask. Now, evasion is very important on this build, and it's the main contributor to your ranger's defense, so you should try your best to increase your evasion whenever possible. If you grab escaped velocity, it will give you 3% increased movement speed and an additional 30% increased evasion rating. You should also grab these nodes and passives at the top here if you want to increase the effectiveness of your shock and lightning damage. If you grab these 3 nodes, your shock chance will increase by 30% and your elemental damage will increase by 24%. These nodes to the right here will give you 33% lightning penetration towards enemies who are resistant and will also increase your dex by 10. If we continue downwards to the right, you'll reach some passives that will help you increase your attack damage and shock damage even further. Maiming Strike increases your attack damage by 25% and applies a 25% chance for your arrows to maim enemies, which actually decreases their movement speed by 30% and evasion by 15%. The nodes below will give you a massive increase to the magnitude of your shock, making them more powerful, and will also increase your mana regeneration rate, which is important if you want to spam lightning bolts. If we move to the top here, you also need to grab Falcon Technique. This passive increases your attack speed by 1% for every 15 dexterity on your build. So for example, if you have 150 dexterity on your build, your attack speed will increase by 10% and will stack on top of Tailwind, allowing you to shoot arrows very fast. And lastly, you should grab all of these nodes to the right here, which will give you a massive bonus to dexterity, which is important for attack speed, and evasion, which is important for maximum survivability. I'm still progressing in this tree, so if you want to see a more complete version, make sure you subscribe to the channel and be on the lookout for an updated endgame build in the near future. Gear is actually very important if you want as much damage and survivability as possible. Now, you'll find a ton of gear as you play, but it's all RNG, which means you may never get the pieces you need. This is why before I break down my gear pieces, I need everyone to know that Path of Exile 2 has an official trading website where you can log into your account, search for the gear items and modifiers you need, and then purchase those items with in-game currency like Exalted Orbs or Orbs of Augmentation, for example. This process should become a staple of your leveling process. It is going to take forever to find the weapons and gear you need just by playing. I'll put a link to the trading website in the description below for everyone to use. I feel like a lot of people don't know about this feature, and if you use it, it's going to make your gameplay experience way more enjoyable. My main bow on this build is the Maelstrom Volley Zealot bow with 20% quality, 93 to 182 physical damage, and 1 to 47 lightning damage. My runes are giving me 20% increased physical damage and 1 to 20 lightning damage. For the modifiers, I have 131% physical damage, 1 to 27 lightning damage, 25% elemental damage, and 24% crit damage bonus. I'm also using the Maelstrom Quiver, which provides 3 life per enemy hit, 1 to 22 lightning damage, 31% increased damage with bow skills, 345 accuracy, and 20 dexterity. For my helmet, I'm using the Dragon Guardian Lace Hood with 12% cold resistance, 88 accuracy, 30 mana, 18% cold resistance, and 14% lightning resistance. For the chest piece, I have the Dreadcoat Scalper's Jacket with 20% quality, 215 evasion rating, and 89 shield. My rune is adding 20% extra evasion and shield, and for the modifiers, I have 34% increased evasion and shield, 33 spirit, 17 intelligence, 14% cold resistance, and 11% lightning resistance. For rings and amulets, your goal is to stack resistances, damage, and mana regen rate. If you take a quick look at my amulet and rings, you'll see modifiers that increase my physical damage, lightning damage, and most importantly, mana regen, which is crucial if you want to spam skills and be effective. My amulet and rings alone are giving me over 100% extra mana regen rate on my build, which is insane. For my gloves, I have the Dread Mitts Spiral Wraps with 8 to 17 physical damage to attacks, 1 to 7 lightning damage to attacks, 17 max life, 23% fire resistance, and 28% lightning resistance. For the belt, just try to use anything that will increase your resistances to fire, lightning, cold, or even chaos. And lastly, for the boots, I have the Vortex Road Silk Slippers, which provide 20% movement speed, lightning resistance, max life, max mana, and some intelligence as well. As always guys, give this build a try and come back to the video and let me know how it went for you. It deletes mobs and bosses. I promise you will not regret it. Like I mentioned earlier, if you want to see the best monk build in the game, I'll have a link to my entire monk build series in the description below. I will also have a link to the official Path of Exile 2 trading website as well, so if you haven't already, click the link, log into your account, and grab some good gear for your character immediately. If you enjoyed this video, a like would be very much appreciated. It helps the channel grow, and it will recommend the video to more people. If you want to see more Path of Exile 2 videos coming soon, don't forget to subscribe and turn on those bell notifications. Thanks for watching, everyone.